All right, strap in, everyone. Today, we are going deep, deep into primate behavior and what it can tell us about ourselves, us humans. You sent in this fascinating YouTube video summarizing Our Inner Ape by Frans de Waal.
It's a real classic.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a wild one, guys. We're going to be talking about chimpanzee power struggles, bonobo peace
And
treaties.
maybe even a little bit about guerrilla dating strategies.
Exactly. And we're going to see what all this primate craziness tells us about why we humans act the way we do.
You know, De Waal's work, it really throws a wrench into some old ideas about human evolution.
Oh, how so?
Well, for a long time, the selfish gene theory was king.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Right, popularized by thinkers like Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
The basic idea, it was that evolution favors selfish behavior, things that help an individual survive and reproduce.
So basically, deep down, we're all just wired to be self-serving jerks. It's that kind of depressing.
Yeah, it can seem that way. But De Waal, he argues that's just too simplistic. He spent his whole career observing primates.
Decades, right?
Yeah, decades. And what he's seen suggests that cooperation, empathy, even a sense of fairness, these things are baked right into our primate heritage.
Okay, so maybe we're not all destined to be these cutthroat competitors after all.
That's right.
But hold on. If even our primate cousins can be all cooperative and empathetic, how did those traits evolve?
Great question. And De Waal dives deep into that. He says that cooperation, empathy, they actually give primates a big advantage, evolutionarily speaking, especially for social animals.
Makes sense.
And, take bonobos, for example.
Ah, yes. Our favorite peace-loving, free-loving primates.
Exactly. They're famous for their, let's just say, enthusiastic approach to intimacy.
Oh, yeah. The video even said a circus owner had to shut down their bonobo exhibit because their mating habits were too much for the audience.
It's true.
It makes you wonder what they were getting up to in there.
Well, their sexual behavior, it's not just about reproduction, Bonobos use it to say hello.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to ease tension, even to, patch things up after a fight.
It's like their version of shaking hands.
Or a high five.
A high five. Haha. So free love equals a peaceful society. I like the sound of that.
It's an interesting thought, for sure. But what's really fascinating is that bonobo society is remarkably peaceful. And a lot of that seems to be because the females have such strong bonds.
Yeah. They really do seem to run the show, don't they?
They do.
Pretty impressive, considering the usual assumption that, bigger muscles equals more power.
Totally. The bonobos, they challenge that whole idea that brute force is the only way to the top. It shows that social smarts, cooperation, strong female alliances, those things can be just as powerful, maybe even more so.
Okay, so we've got the bonobos over there spreading the love. But what about their, let's call them more assertive cousins, the chimpanzees?
Right.
They have a pretty intense social hierarchy, don't they?
Oh, they do.
It's more than just like who's the biggest and strongest, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's way more complex than that. It's all about social dynamics. Chimps that want to climb the ladder, they've got to form alliances, think strategically, even engage in some, well, de Waal calls it Machiavellian tactics.
So basically like political maneuvering and power plays. Sounds kind of familiar.
More than you'd think. For example, grooming.
Sure.
It's a big deal in chimp society. It's not just about hygiene. It's how they build relationships, show loyalty, even suck up to the higher-ups.
Ah, so it's like taking someone out for a fancy dinner or donating to their campaign.
Exactly. And just like human politics, the chimps who are good at networking and forming alliances, well, they tend to come out on top.
Okay, so there is some serious social strategizing going on in the chimp world. But even with all this politicking, isn't it still true that in the end, only the most dominant males get to mate? Like, does brute force really win the day?
That's where things get even more interesting. De Waal points out this fascinating link between dominance, physical traits, even lifespan. It's not always about being the biggest and strongest. And he uses a pretty striking example to make this point. Gorilla testicles.
Okay, now we're going off the beaten path.
It might seem odd, but it makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. You see, dominant male gorillas, they don't face much competition for mates.
I guess that's true.
So they have relatively small testicles. They just don't need to produce as much sperm.
Huh. So in the gorilla world, size doesn't always matter.
Not necessarily. Now, chimps, they're a different story.
Oh, yeah.
Their testicles are much larger
Because
because the competition for mates is fierce. The pressure to pass on their genes is enormous.
so different mating strategies lead to different evolutionary pressures, which then shape their physical traits. It's like a feedback loop.
Exactly.
But hold on. You mentioned lifespan. What's the connection there?
Well, all that stress, the constant fighting for dominance and access to mates, it takes a toll.
Mm.
Think about male lions, for example. They spend their lives battling to rule the pride, and that constant stress probably contributes to them having shorter lifespans than females.
Wow. So you're saying that being less aggressive could actually help you live longer? Maybe those peaceful bonobos are onto something?
It's a possibility worth considering, and De Waal suggests that this whole dominance struggle and all the stress that comes with it might have shaped human evolution too.
Now that's something to think about. Okay, so we've talked about bonobo love-ins, chimpanzee power struggles, and even gorilla anatomy. But let's get real. Primate behavior isn't always sunshine and roses. The video mentioned some pretty dark stuff too, like infanticide.
Yeah, it's a disturbing reality. In some primate species, and even other animals like lions, you see males killing the offspring of their rivals.
Yeah, it's a brutal strategy, but I guess it makes sense, evolutionarily speaking. You eliminate the competition, even if it means harming innocent infants.
It's a stark reminder that nature can be pretty harsh. But thankfully, not all primates resort to such extreme measures.
Yeah, the bonobos, right. With their, shall we say, open-minded approach to mating, infanticide wouldn't really work, would it? You'd never know who the father was.
Exactly. And this brings us to a fascinating point about human evolution. We share some similarities with bonobos, our capacity for multiple partners.
Yeah.
But we've also evolved this tendency towards pair bonding, forming long-term relationships to raise kids together.
So maybe our desire for stable relationships, for love and commitment, that's partly rooted in this ancient need to protect our children.
It's a possibility.
That's a powerful thought.
It suggests that our social behaviors are shaped by this whole mix of evolutionary forces, both old and new.
Okay, now I want to talk about one of the coolest things from this video. The idea that primates have a sense of fairness.
Oh, yeah.
They showed these capuchin monkeys doing tasks.
Right.
And some got rewarded with grapes, which they love.
Love.
And others got cucumbers, which, let's be honest, are not exactly a delicacy in the monkey world.
Definitely not. It's a classic De Waal experiment.
Yeah.
And the monkeys' reactions, they were amazing.
Oh, yeah. They didn't just sit there and take the cucumbers. They protested.
They did.
They started checking their work, like, hey, did I mess something up here?
Right.
And some even got so mad they started throwing pebbles at the researchers.
It's
It was like they knew they were getting a raw deal.
Exactly. They understood fairness. They expected to be rewarded for their effort, and they weren't afraid to show their displeasure.
So monkeys throwing tantrums over unfair cucumber portions. Yeah. Who knew? But it gets even crazier. The video said they did a similar experiment with chimpanzees, and the results were even more surprising.
Oh, yeah, that one's a classic, too. The chimps who were getting the better reward, the grapes,
Yeah.
they actually started refusing them.
Really?
It was like they were showing solidarity with the chimps who were getting the short end of the stick.
It's like they were saying, hey, if my buddy can't have grapes, then I don't want them either. That's wild.
It is. It really challenges the idea that fairness is just a human thing.
Okay, so if monkeys and chimps care about fairness, does that mean they can also feel empathy? Can they really understand and share the emotions of others?
That's a question that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to answer, for sure.
Right.
But there's some pretty convincing evidence that primates, at least, are capable of something very much like empathy.
Like that heartwarming story from the video about the bonobo who rescued an injured bird.
Oh, that one gets me every time.
Me too. She didn't just take care of the bird. She actually tried to help it fly again.
It's an incredible example. It suggests she understood the bird's distress, the bird's desire to fly.
Yeah. She wasn't just reacting to the bird's injuries. She was responding to its emotional state, too. It's like she put herself in the bird's place.
Right.
And tried to imagine what it would be like to be stuck on the ground, unable to take to the sky.
And these glimpses of primate empathy, they really challenge that old idea that humans are the only ones who can feel these complex emotions.
Yeah. Okay, so we've seen the heartwarming side of primate behavior, the
Mhm.
cooperation, the empathy, the fairness, even the bonobo's unique approach to making love, not war. But let's be honest, primates can also be kind of jerks.
That's true.
The video mentioned chimpanzees exhibiting xenophobia, right? Basically a fear or hatred of strangers.
It's true. And it reminds us that our evolutionary heritage, it's complex. There's good and bad. Jane Goodall, who, she spent decades studying chimps in the wild,
Oh, yeah.
she saw some pretty chilling examples of violence between groups. Like in one case, a group of male chimps straight up murdered a stranger from a rival community.
That's dark. Sounds like a scene from Planet of the Apes, except it's
Mhm.
real life. So are we doomed to repeat these patterns of aggression just because it's in our nature?
Not necessarily. Remember the bonobos.
Oh, our favorite peacemakers.
Right. They offer a bit of hope. Now, they might not exactly welcome strangers with open arms, but they tend to de-escalate conflict through, well.
Right, right. A little bit of bonobo love. But seriously, it's encouraging. Their approach suggests that even something like xenophobia, which seems so deeply rooted, can be softened, maybe even transformed
Mm.
through social interaction, cooperation.
Hmm.
Okay, so this brings us to the big question, morality.
Hmm.
We humans like to think we're these rational beings making moral decisions based on logic and reason.
Right.
But the video talked about this fascinating experiment with the trolley problem, and the results were pretty wild.
The trolley problem, it's a classic thought experiment that really gets to the heart of how we make these moral judgments.
Yeah.
In the experiment, people are given two versions of a dilemma. In the first one, they have to choose between letting a runaway trolley kill 5 people or flipping a switch to divert it to a track where it would only kill one person.
Okay, yeah, I see the dilemma. Logically, you'd flip the switch, save 4 lives, right? But it still feels wrong to actively choose to kill someone, even if it means saving others.
Exactly. And most people do choose to flip the switch, which makes sense rationally.
Yeah.
But it gets really interesting with the second version.
Oh, how so?
This time, they're told they can stop the trolley by pushing a large person onto the tracks.
Ooh, that's much tougher. So, same outcome. One person dies instead of 5. But pushing someone to their death feels so much worse, morally speaking, than just flipping a switch, even though it's the same result.
And that's the whole point. Most people say the second option is totally unacceptable, even though it's logically the same as the first. What it tells us is that our moral judgments, they aren't always based on cold, hard logic.
So, are we just irrational beings ruled by our emotions?
Not quite. The video, it connects us to brain imaging studies, which show that these gut reactions we have to moral dilemmas, they come from really old parts of the brain, parts we share with other primates. So it's like our moral sense is rooted deep in our evolutionary past, those gut feelings that helped our ancestors navigate the complexities of social life.
Exactly.
So even though we think we're all logical and reasoned, our inner ape is still whispering in our ear, guiding our moral compass.
Exactly. Our moral sense, it's a blend of reason and emotion. And understanding our primate heritage, it helped us untangle those threads to see how our primal instincts and our capacity for rational thought, how they intertwine.
Wow. That's That's a lot to think about. This has been a really eye-opening look into our primate roots. Clearly, there's a ton more to learn here.
It really makes you wonder just how much of what we do, even our sense of right and wrong, comes from that shared evolutionary history with primates.
Yeah. Like, are we more influenced by our inner ape than we realize?
That's a question people have been wrestling with for ages. But I think the important thing is understanding our primate heritage. It gives us these valuable insights into our own nature, the good and the bad.
So let's take a step back, recap a bit. We're not as different from our primate cousins as we might like to think.
Definitely not.
Chimpanzee power struggles, bonobos making peace with.
Right, right. All very relatable in a strange way.
Exactly. And it's not just those surface similarities. Primates, they can do things we used to think were uniquely human.
It's true.
Cooperation, empathy, fairness. It's all there in our primate family tree.
It really is remarkable. And even some of our not so great tendencies like xenophobia, we see hints of that in the primate world too.
It's like looking in a funhouse mirror, seeing those better angels, but also our shadow selves, all reflected back.
That's a great way to put it. And I think you've hit on something crucial here. Understanding those shared evolutionary roots, it helps us understand ourselves. It's not about saying humans are just animals.
Right.
It's about seeing the connections, the complexities of that shared journey.
It is kind of humbling, isn't it?
It is.
To realize that creatures we consider primitive, they have those same complex emotions, those social behaviors. Makes you wonder if they can adapt, evolve. What's our potential as humans?
That is the million-dollar question. If chimps can learn to share, to work together, if bonobos can figure out conflict resolution without violence, what does that say about us? About what we could achieve?
So are we stuck, like slaves to our inner ape?
Hmm.
Or can we break free from all that evolutionary baggage and create a better world? It's like we're at a fork in the road. One path leads back to those primal instincts, the other towards, I don't know, something more enlightened.
I believe we're capable of both.
Yeah.
Sure, we're influenced by our past, but we also have this amazing ability to stop, to think about our actions, to make choices, to try to be better. The key is understanding our nature, both our limits and our potential.
This has been mind-blowing, really, exploring these primate roots. So much to learn. But before we go, what's one big takeaway you want listeners to walk away with?
If I had to pick one, it would be this. Our inner ape, it's not something to be afraid of, to try to hide. We need to understand it, embrace it. It's part of who we are, for better or worse. By recognizing that shared heritage, we can start using our strengths, working on those weaknesses.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into our inner ape. We hope you've enjoyed this adventure into the world of primate behavior and what it tells us about being human. It's like we have this power, right, to choose which parts of our nature we nurture.
Right.
It's not about denying those primal urges, but understanding how they influence us, then using our brains and our higher thinking to make good choices, choices that fit with our values.
It's about harnessing that inner ape energy, right?
Yeah.
And directing it towards something good. Instead of giving in to those knee-jerk reactions, like aggression or fear of the unknown, we can channel that energy into cooperation, creative problem-solving, building stronger communities.
So instead of hoarding all the resources or seeing outsiders as a threat, we can be more like the bonobos, use our social skills to connect, resolve conflicts peacefully. We can learn from chimps too, and how they work together so well to reach goals that benefit everyone.
Exactly. It all comes down to recognizing that we're interconnected. Our actions have consequences. Even little acts of kindness, of understanding, can have a huge impact.
It's like that saying, be the change you want to see in the world. But maybe it's more like, be the primate you want to see in the world.
Yeah, I like that.
Lead with empathy, build strong relationships, maybe even, settle a dispute with a hug instead of a fight.
That's beautiful. We really do have the power to choose. Which parts of our primate heritage will we embrace? Which instincts will we nurture and which ones will we challenge? Will we be that competitive, aggressive ape or the cooperative, empathetic one? It's up to us.
And the more we learn about our primate cousins, the better equipped we are to make those choices with intention. It's really a journey of self-discovery. By understanding where we came from, we can unlock our potential now and create a better future for everyone, for generations to come.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that inspiring note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into our inner ape.
We hope you've enjoyed exploring primate behavior with us and maybe discovered something new about your own human nature along the way.
Remember, knowledge is power. Understanding our instincts, that's how we harness that power for good. To create a world where cooperation beats conflict and empathy wins the day.
So go out there and be the best primate you can be. Spread kindness, embrace those who are different, and never underestimate the power of, a good grooming session to strengthen those bonds.
And if you ever feel yourself getting a little too primal, a little overwhelmed by all the craziness, just remember those bonobos. They show us that even tension can be diffused with a little love and understanding. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, keep evolving.
And never stop asking those big questions. That's what makes us human. Well, primate, I guess.